please consider liking the video and subscribing. Let's begin. Here we are, after looking at Cuphead's Inkwell Isles 2 all the way to Inkwell Isle Hell. Now, I really enjoyed this series so far. After my last video, it seems that all you want to see me do is the DLC. So if you're new to the series, check out the other videos and then come back to watch this one. If you don't know, let me explain. I'll be looking at the Cuphead boss transition animations in the delicious last course. I'll be ranking them using the Cuphead grading system, and at the end grabbing all the best ones and crowning my personal favorite. Also, I'll be calling out the worst one. By the way, let me know in the comments which intro song for the game do you prefer, the original one or the updated one for the DLC. Personally, I like the DLC one. Anyway, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into the delicious last course. Our first boss of the DLC here is Glumstone the Giant. The boss starts and we see a lot of gnomes mining Glumstone's teeth. Now here's what's cool. Glumstone doesn't seem bothered by this, not until he notices the presence of Miss Chalice. There's a lot going on here. Once Glumstone starts to wake up, all three of the gnomes get thrown off screen. This is a very good animation. I'm giving this one a B. After defeating this phase, Glumstone uses the rocks to hold onto his beard. He then rips off his entire beard and we see his eyes change to being even more angry. Under his beard, we see that Glumstone isn't the best at shaving his facial hair. Maybe that's why he decided not to shave it anymore. Then out of nowhere he falls and appears in the middle. Off screen he rises up with the devil puppet and the king dice puppet. This animation is really good. I'm giving it another B. Finally, moving on to his third and final phase, Glumstone grabs onto the last remaining piece of the mountain and breaks it off. What's cool is here is you can see Glumstone's hands exerting force on the mountain. It's the small details. He then opens up his giant mouth and swallows the player. We transition inside his stomach and we're now fighting his stomach ulcer. It's laughing at us. This is a random transition, though the animation isn't bad, but it isn't also anything insane. I'm going to give this one a C. As for my favorite death animation in this fight, I'm going to be giving it to the first phase where he rips off his beard. Really cool. Moving on to the next one. Next, we have Moonshine Mob. The boss opens up and immediately things are different. The announcer is not our normal one. It's in fact the mob boss of this crime family, the announcer Snail. But when the battle begins, we see everyone. Charlie Left Legs, ready to fight. Lightbug fanning herself in a conceited manner. The announcer Snail is then taken away by one of their goons. He screams as he's flown away. This is cool intro animation. I'm giving this one an A. After defeating Charlie Left Legs, he comes back on screen and starts to reel in Lightbug by using his own webs. He then once again falls off screen. Lightbug, sitting on a record player, does a little 360 twirl and begins her phase. This isn't too much. I'm giving this one a D. After defeating her, we see two giant hands appear and hold on to the current platform. It's the boss of the mob, the announcer Snail, using his most trusted ally, the Anteater. He lifts his hat, takes a bow, allowing his boss to taunt us. This is a really cool animation transition. I'm going to give this one an S. What's cool here too is similar to Werner Werman fight. He breaks off the stage and changes to terrain. After a fake knockout, we enter the fourth and final phase. Like the mob, they set up the player to fail by dropping in a fake knockout banner to confuse us. And the first time I played this, I fell for this. I was so mad. The announcer isn't ours. It's once again the announcer Snail. The knockout banner isn't carried off screen. This is really clever, but in terms of the actual animation, it does not beat the previous one. So I'm giving this one a B. But it does earn the best death animation because no other boss in the game has a fake knockout screen. So they did a good job with this one. Moving on to the next one. In this DLC's first airplane level, it's the Howling Aces with yet another boss a lot of people simp for. And I mean, the boss opens up and we see Sergeant O'Farah standing at the mouth of her own battle helicopter, saluting the player. With her head held up high, she then leaves. At the same time, in the background, we see fighter pilot Bulldog flying in. Finally, we see our own pilot for the first time, Canteen Hughes, who taught us how to fly originally, so I'm glad to see him here. He looks ready for a squabble. This is a very cool intro animation. I'm giving this one an A. After defeating this phase, the fighter pilot Bulldog's plane starts to break down and the Yankee Yippers, who were helping him, now eject themselves from the plane. The Bulldog then braces for impact, since I don't think he had a parachute. Then, the Yankee Yippers come on screen. This is another cool animation. I'm giving this one a B. In the third and final phase of this fight, Sergeant O'Farah flies her plane from the background and then reaches out her paws and grabs the screen. Now, this is her only boss transition animation. Yes, it's cool, but she turns the screen. But I'm just ranking the intro animation, not the fighting animation. So, for this alone, I'm giving this a C. As for my favorite death animation here, I'm giving it to the pilot Bulldog and his Yankee Yippers. Each of them have different facial expressions. The airplane is about to blow up. It looks really cool, the cool detail, and also just how the plane comes apart. Nice stuff. Moving on to the next one. In the final airplane boss stage in this DLC, it's perhaps my least favorite one, the Esther Winchester boss. It starts off when we see Esther's saloon. She pops out of it with her hat in her hand, twirling around, ready for battle. This is nothing too much to look at. I'm giving this one a C. After this phase, we see Esther go back inside her saloon. She comes back out and she sticks out her tongue at Miss Chalice, taunting us. She is now holding a sort of vacuum that sucks in her whole saloon, exposing the rest of her body. What's cool here is you can see each part of the saloon break down in pieces. This is such a clever animation. I'm giving this one an S. In her third and final phase, her own weapon turns against her. It starts sucking her in and she seems terrified. And then she's cooked alive and turns into a giant sausage links. She comes out looking at herself in the mirror, horrified at what she sees. This is the humor of Cuphead. It's dark, but it's funny. I'm going to give this an A. After this, we enter her final phase, where out of nowhere, she looks scared, as if she knows what's coming. A giant can of beef sausages comes in and sucks her right in. The brand is MDHR, Prairie Dogs. Once again, nodding to the humor of Cuphead. This is really cool. I'm giving this a B. As for my favorite death animation in this fight, it has to go to when she's cooked alive. Seeing this pop blow up and just the humor of it, it's funny. Of course it's dark. In another aesthetically pleasing Cuphead boss, we have Mortimer Freeze. I am a fan of this boss. The match begins and we see Mortimer sitting on his high chair with the rest of the spectators. He then flies under his little railing in front of his throne. Losing his hat, he then seizes and just right before it hits the ground, he picks it up and puts it on himself. This is a very cool intro animation. I'm giving this one an A. After defeating this phase, we begin the second one. Here, he pulls up a bell from his pocket. While looking up, then out of nowhere, Jupiter, the snow beast, comes in and wraps around Mortimer as a sort of mech. This is an okay animation. I'm giving this one a B. In the third and final phase, after defeating Jupiter, he begins to hold his stomach in pain. For a second, he turns into a snowflake before being blown up. Then we transition out of the snow palace and begin fighting Mortimer, who's now inside a giant frozen snowflake. What's cool is when he's coming in from the background, he licks his fingers looking ready to fight. If you pay even close attention, you can actually see water drip from his finger. This is a really cool animation. I'm giving this one an S. My personal favorite death animation here belongs to the very last one. The snowflake has a very sad expression and it begins to melt. Out of it, Mortimer, and then we see him shaking, and now he looks like he just caught a nasty cold. He shakes and even has a thermostat and an ice pack on him. This is very funny and very fun. Moving on to the final boss of this DLC. The guy who we trusted and looked really nice, in fact had his own motives the entire time. Chef Saltbaker. The match leads up to us going to his basement of the bakery, and we see him laughing maliciously. We find out he's held Cuphead as hostage, or whoever you don't choose to play as. And then the battle begins. It opens up and we see Saltbaker standing over us. He grabs his little bow tie and twirls it. He then flings the ingredients off the table. This is a cool animation. I just love his facial expressions and how intimidating it is. I'm going to give this one an A. After defeating this phase, he gets angry. Now pounding both hands on the table, he then pulls out a mythic mushroom, putting it in his head. It gives him powers. He grows in size and his eyes change. He then reaches out and takes us to the roof. Now there's a lot here, because by slowing down the frames while transforming, the entire screen changes colors and glows white. Even his belly fat goes over the table. This is an elite transition animation. I'm giving this one an S. In his second phase, after defeating his giant phase, he finally begins to crack. Now the entire bakery is coming apart. He looks around in anger and the screen begins to be filled with salt and debris. He screams and the screen goes white. This is really cool. I'm giving this one an A. In the third phase, we are now in the salt dimension. In the background, we see two giant salt hands form a dancing Saltbaker. This is perhaps the most lackluster animation here. I'm going to give this one a B. In the final fourth phase of this fight, we see Saltbaker rise from the salt heap, and he twirls into a twister. Then the actual heart of Saltbaker rises as well. He laughs and goes into a twister. At the same time, the floor starts to crumble as we're surrounded by vortex of Saltbaker with a lot of facial expressions. This is really cool. I'm giving this one an A. As for my favorite death animation here, it goes to the ending one. We see the heart of Saltbaker cracking and freaking out. Also, the vortex of faces on the side are hurting. Some are even dead. This entire fight was really well done. And that is every boss in this DLC. Let's look at the results. Whoa, wait a minute. I'm feeling really tired. What's going on? Yes, of course I didn't forget about the devil and angel fight. This was a really cool boss battle. It's also kind of scary, the music and the aura of it. Now, there isn't really any transition animations, but I will rank it based off theme and death animation. First, let's look at it as a whole. We wake up, and on one side we see a demon, on the other an angel. We're in the astral plane, a mysterious place in the Cuphead universe, but you can't forget about the giant skeleton of the actual devil himself. He watches over us as we fight. Also, the stage on where we stand on is his hand. This is a beautiful boss fight. Visually, I'm giving this one an S. As for the death animation, it's also not something to overlook. When you defeat them, they both look really terrified of you as to what you just did. The demon, though, looks even more terrified than the angel. When the screen starts to fade into black, both spirits are then sucked into the devil's skull. Notice how they both don't want to go back in, as if this fight was their last chance of freedom. This is a really great boss, and the animation, of course, it gets an S. Now, let's take a look at the real results. The best boss animation transitions are the following. Out of these, the best boss transition is going to Saltbaker's second phase. Now, it's just so cool seeing him transition and transform. Those couple of frames where he is engulfed in power and him grabbing us and taking the fight to the highest floor. Now, the rest here are of course elite. As for the worst in the DLC, it's going to Charlie Leftlegs, bringing in the light bug. This was nothing. It's forgettable. Now, for the best death animation, it's going to have to go to the angel and the demon. That was like so much lore for like 3 seconds of animation. Such a really cool dark animation. I just want to say thank you all so very much for watching this series. It was really fun going over these bosses. Now, if you haven't seen the other videos, please watch them. They're in the description. So once again, thank you all very much. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Also, if there's other games you'd like for me to look at or ideas, please write them down below. I'd be happy to read them. So please take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.